With worldwide communication and the internet, we have access to so much more than we did in the past. This has led to us seeing some things that we would not have seen otherwise, and a bunch of it is pretty scary. Hey most amazing fam, I'm your host Abby, and today I'm bringing you the top 10 scary things you weren't supposed to see. If you like videos like this, make sure to click on over and catch a playlist. Starting off at number 10, the Cave of Hanging Serpents. It is known as Bat Cave by the locals of the nearest village, Kentemo, or the Cave of Hanging Snakes. This is because snakes hang from the ceiling and snatch bats out of the air. The yellow-red rat snake lives in the ceiling of the cave and dangles from the ceiling whenever a swarm of bats pass by. The usual prey for snakes of this kind are rodents, lizards, or other small grounded animals, but these snakes adapted. Now they have a cool ceiling network of tunnels to hide in, and their prey just flies right by when they grab them. But you can imagine it is quite scary sight to see. Countless snakes popping out of the ceiling. Like, if I was there, I would fear one would drop right in front of me. But when tourists do venture into the cave, they tend to be alright, as the snakes aren't as dangerous to humans. About 300 visitors enter the cave a year to try to see the unique habitat, and they go in small groups guided by locals to preserve the habitat. But still, kind of creepy to see. On to number 9, Daddy Park. So this amusement park began as a church playground, actually. It was made for the children of the people visiting the Basilica of Our Lady d'Azadel back in 1950. But by 1980, the amusement rides just overtook the park and it became an amusement park. So why is it left abandoned today? While it was once visited by 1 million visitors in its peak year, the rides became run down over time. It was dangerous for the children and small incidents began to pile up. It was hazardous to the point that in 2000, a boy lost his arm on the Nautic jet ride. As children and danger do not bode well together, less and less people went to the park. In 2002, Daddy Park was closed for renovations and never reopened. Nature overtook again, and so did those who like to trespass and wander through abandoned spaces. People who went said it was eerie to walk through a place and expect to hear children's laughter looking at all the rides, but they walked through a thick silence. Since 2011, it has been set for demolition, and slowly pieces of it have been taken away until now there is nothing left, and it is a hiking park with a tragic past. On to number 8, BORLEY Rectory. So the creepy ghost of a Victorian boy wasn't what 17-year-old Russell Old anticipated to find at BORLEY Rectory. He went as a teen with some friends and his uncle, and though they thought they could see something cool, he was told by his uncle it was the most haunted place in England, they just weren't ready for a small Victorian boy ghost. While approaching BORLEY Rectory, his arm hair stood on end, and he saw this Victorian boy in a tweed jacket, but no one else did. Then the whole group saw strange lights and felt just kind of on edge during their visit. When they returned to their car at the end of this strange visit, there were thumps on the car from an unseen force. Feeling kind of scared, they wanted to leave, but his uncle, who was trying to pull out of the lot, paused to let a car pass that no one else had seen. In addition to this story, other visitors have talked about seeing burning figures roaming around and a floating nun that follows you around. Just a little much. Moving on to number 7, an abandoned amusement park. Another one. So this amusement park was one that was set to open in a week before it was shut down for good. The reason? The Chernobyl disaster in 1986. The 4 rides at the park, bumper cars, Ferris wheel, swing boats, and a paratrooper ride, remain unridden forever. The town of Pripyat in Ukraine was too close to the Chernobyl disaster, and all neighboring areas were evacuated. Since there is radioactive residue that lingers in the area from the explosion, it remains abandoned. For over 30 years now, the amusement park has been rusting in the rain. It is a solemn reminder that nature will reclaim what people abandon. The trees growing into the structure that houses the bumper cars, the leaves and moss just in clumps all around the ground. And more than that, it is eerie to look at the rust and dirt taking over the bright carnival-like colors of the rides. Just a bit offsetting. We are used to the bright fun lights, not what happens when we're gone and nature takes over. On to number 6, SEDLEC Ossuary. So this is a church of bones in Czech Republic that is decorated with 40,000 human skeletons. Most people know it as the Bone Church. It began as a popular burial site, and this was because an abbot brought back soil from the grave of the Lord to SEDLEC Ossuary. People wanted to get buried there, and when it became too full for everyone to rest there in peace, they were moved to a crypt. And then in 1870, a local woodcarver named Frantic Rint was hired to work with the bones. He artfully arranged them all around the ossuary, and it dazzles some and reminds many others of their future death. Little grim. and I wouldn't be prepared to see a skeleton as a part of a chandelier, because then I would be thinking about what if my bones were part of that chandelier. It's not my thing, but it is kind of cool to look at for sure. On to number 5, Holy Land in Waterbury, Connecticut. So it all started with the idea of having a roadside theme park devoted to God back in the 1950s. It had a Hollywood-style sign that said Holy Land USA and biblical-themed dioramas, among other tributes to Christianity. But it was closed in 1984 for renovation and never reopened when the founder and creator died in 1986. So nuns took over to keep the park clean without reopening it, but it was quickly riddled with blasphemy and vandalization. Someone else bought the property and put up no trespassing signs, but people go there every once in a while to break the law to fulfill their curiosity. It looks desolate and quite a bit creepy now, not quite the raving roadside attraction it once was. At number 4, we have collections of dead people. Now, maybe you have attended a funeral and seen someone who has passed, but seeing death on a much larger scale is 100% different. But that's what the Museum of Death in Los Angeles does. It started out as an art gallery that didn't even focus on death. Its aim was about consumerism and how it's with you from birth until death. But then they wrote to serial killers, and the direction of the gallery went towards death much more so, and then became a museum so it could showcase the more gruesome or nude pieces. There you can see the mummified severed head of Henri Landru, serial murderer artwork, Charles Manson crime scene photos, the Heaven's Gate recruiting video, a body bag and coffin collection, and just so much more gruesome stuff. Just death everywhere. Many things your eyes were never meant to see, but you can go there if they are open and if you want to see that stuff. On number 3, we have the Screaming Tunnel. There are some things we aren't meant to see or interact with, as I've said, and the Screaming Tunnel is one of these cases. There are a couple of versions of the legend of the Screaming Tunnel, but all are versions trying to make sense of an unexplainable phenomenon that happens in the tunnel. If you light a match at the center of the tunnel, you will hear the terrified screams of a young girl, and a gust of wind will extinguish the match. There are 3 main stories to explain why that happens. One is that this girl escaped a burning barn, but her burns were too much and she only made it as far as the tunnel before she died. The second story is that her father, jealous and mad over a lost custody battle, dragged her to the tunnel and set her on fire. And lastly, that a drunk old man assaulted her, killed her, and then burned her body to destroy the evidence. Who knows which is true, or if any are. On to number 2, Monte Cristo Homestead. The Monte Cristo Homestead was built by Christopher Crawley in 1884. It was given possession to his wife Emily in 1910. But more than that, this Australian cottage is full of strange apparitions linked to possible deaths that were never supposed to happen. A maid fell to her death from the upstairs balcony. A stable boy is said to have been burned in his bed by his master. An ill man named Harold is said to have been kept in chains after being found curled up by his mother's dead body. The rattling of his chains are said to warn the approach of his ghost and the other specters that join him. Plus, Emily Crawley herself is said to haunt the homestead. She became a recluse after her husband passed away and stayed within the home. After she died from an appendix rupture, her essence stayed and still haunts it now. Lastly, number 1, inside the tombs of Egyptian kings. So, what's the difference between a grave robber and an archaeologist? A couple hundred years of rest and a degree. People weren't supposed to get into King Tutankhamun's tomb, but they did. They opened it on November 29th, 1922, and people say a curse escaped because a dozen people who had some sort of tie to the opening died in the years that followed. Howard Carter died in February of 1923. He opened Tut's tomb. His older brother dies the same year. Then in April, Lord Carnarvon dies from an infected mosquito bite, and he was the financial backer. In May, George J. Gould I dies from a fever after he visits the tomb. And then more and more. A prince dies after being shot by his wife. A colonel dies from blood poisoning. A governor general is assassinated. A member of the evacuation team dies from arsenic poisoning, and it goes on. The items inside the tomb are at museums now, but they came at a price. And that was our last number on the list. If you enjoyed this video and are ready for more, put on one of our playlists, kick back and relax. Make sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram, like, comment, and subscribe, all that fun stuff. I've been your host, Abby. This has been Top 10 Scary Things You Weren't Supposed to See, and I hope you have a great day. Be kind. Bye. At number 10, the Cave of Hanging Serpents. Wow. People weren't supposed to get into King Tutankhamun. I just need to make this right. Supposed to get into King Tutankhamun's tomb. I pronounced that wrong.